I'm really happy to be here today. Again, my name is Anna Clough. I currently serve as part of our Tribal Youth Resource Center team, and I shared a little bit about where I'm joining from. I'm here in Oklahoma. I'm a part of a larger team. We have a fully remote staff located in different communities across the country, and so I'm really grateful to be here today. I am a licensed attorney here in Oklahoma and have had experience working in tribal justice systems here in the state, also in state court systems, and have been providing training and technical assistance as part of the OJJDP Tribal Youth Training and Technical Assistance Providers for about the last 3.5 to 4 years. And I enjoy greatly working with tribal families here in the state and have enjoyed serving different communities as a training provider over the past several years. So welcome to many of the grantees that I have worked with. I see some names in the room that I'm familiar with, and welcome if you are an OJJDP grantee, and also if you aren't. So thank you for being here today. I'm also really happy to introduce our facilitators, Ashley Trautman, who is joining us from the National Native Children's Trauma Center, and Alan Rabideau, who is their Youth and Family Engagement Specialist at the National Native Children's Trauma Center. And I'll just quickly read some bios for Ashley and Alan. Ashley serves as an assistant professor at the University of Montana School of Social Work and a juvenile justice technical assistant specialist at the National Native Children's Trauma Center. In her work at NNCTC, she provides training and technical assistance on the issue of childhood trauma to tribal communities across the country. This work has included training to tribal court judges, attorneys, advocates, school professionals, and social service workers on trauma-informed policies and practices. In her role as faculty in the School of Social Work, Ashley teaches policy, the Indian Child Welfare Act, and a class on the history of laws and policies impacting tribal sovereignty and contemporary implications to tribal communities. So welcome, Ashley, and thank you again for joining us on session 3. And Alan is joining us as part of the NNCTC training team that's a partner with the Tribal Youth Resource Center. He is a member of the Sault Ste. Marie Tribe of Chippewa Indians in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan. He provides consultation and technical assistance on various issues of development and integration of Ojibwe cultural values in human service agencies and organizations. Alan's central focus is family engagement, and he has served in many capacities in the substance abuse field, tribal services, student services, family engagement specialties, and you can read more about Alan on our Tribal Youth Resource staff and consultants page, and so we welcome you to check that out on the Tribal Youth website. Alan and Ashley, do you want to say hello?
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. Look forward to spending the next hour or so together.
Yes, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining. This is Alan Rabideau. I'm happy to be part of this and looking forward to how we can answer some of your questions.
Thank you, Alan and Ashley. So with that, we've introduced ourselves. We want to welcome everyone here into the room today. We are so glad that you've joined us, and many of you have been able to participate in session 1 and session 2. If you haven't, that's okay. We've made our way to session 3, and we're really happy if you're joining us again. If you want to share where you're joining from and your current role within your program or within your court system, we would love to know who's with us today. And we want to say welcome to a lot of you that are joining us from different places in the country. So hello, Kimberly. We have some Alaska folks online. I see that. Randy, Kip. Hello, Christy. Marianne. Courtney. Hi, Natalie. Hello, Ethelene and Sarah. We're so glad that you're here today. If you all have joined on session 1 and session 2, feel free to let us know if you have any follow-up questions from that. We have some time during today's session to talk about that. And then if you missed session 1 and 2, we do have those archived on our YouTube channel, and we will post a link to that during the webinar. So thank you again. So glad that you all are here. So I'm going to do a quick overview of today's presentation. We are going to review some of the concepts that we discussed in sessions 1 and sessions 2 of this Truancy Prevention Learning Series. We are going to survey a sample truancy code and learn how trauma-informed practice can inform truancy codes. We want to engage in discussion with you related to a self-assessment tool that was developed by our NNCTC partner and with some cooperation from our center, the Tribal Youth Resource Center. And then we want to consider opportunities for how trauma-informed practices can contribute to prevention and reduction of truancy and increase youth resiliency. So that's our overview of today's presentation, and we do have some downloads available to you in the download pod. There is a copy of today's PowerPoint presentation that's downloadable in the pod. It's a PDF. The assessment tool that we will be discussing today is also available. And then we also have a sample tribal truancy code, and that is the UROC Stay in School code that's in that download pod. So just to get some discussion going in the room, we want to work through a few questions that will give us a better idea of where you're at in your programming and the development of your code and policies that support truancy programming in your community. And so our first question that we wanted to ask today is, do you currently have a truancy program? And if so, do you have written policies and procedures? So if you all want to share, that'll give us an idea of who in the room has a truancy program currently. If you're working with a truancy program, if you're interested in developing one, if you've just gotten a grant to start the development of your truancy program, feel free to share where you're at in development and if you currently have written policies and procedures. And I can see some of you are typing, so we'll give everyone a minute to work on that and sharing. It's really helpful to us as the training and technical assistance provider to know who we're serving and in what ways we can serve in the best way. So I can see some people don't have policies in place quite yet. Paul notes that there's a code section for truancy. It's about a paragraph, nothing like the UROC code, no policies or procedures that I know of. And we just want to say that, you know, everyone comes to this in different places, and that's why we're here. So if you're interested in developing your program further, or you're interested in developing your policies and procedures, we're here to support you in those efforts, and that's why we're doing this training today. Thank you all for sharing. Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Sarah and Tricia. And I'll let individuals continue to share if you like, and you can share in that chat pod. Alan, I'm going to let you move on to question 2.
Thank you, Anna. So some of you have mentioned that you have truancy codes from as short as a paragraph, and then one we provided, the UROC one, is a little bit more lengthy. So yeah, if any more specific, anybody have any more specifics on their truancy code? I think I saw a comment that somebody mentioned that they have a truancy code currently, but it hasn't been updated since like 2004. Anybody else in that situation where their truancy code is really, in your opinion, outdated, I guess? So, and then we do use the term truancy. Thank you, Natalie. It is, compulsory education code. So there's other names like UROC, stay in school code, anything that's related to keeping our children in school. See, we have a bunch of people typing again. We're still having some audio issues by the sound of it. Sorry about that, guys. But thank you again for your input. Feel free to keep answering these questions. It's helping us learn more about who's in attendance. Question 3.
Thank you, Alan,
Anna?
and let us know. We'll keep speaking, and hopefully, if you're hearing us, it's coming through. We will note it is best to call in. Phone audio seems to be the best method. If you have a low bandwidth and you're connecting via the internet, it can sometimes cut out. But with that, question 3, have you ever revised or taken part in an update of your tribal code or program policies? I know some of you may have been working through code development or policy development. If so, if you want to share what are some of the steps you took to work through that process, I know that that can be really helpful for individuals who are just now starting a code development project or a policy development project. And we are really interested in sharing about those efforts. We would love to talk with any of you who've worked through that revision or development process, because it can be really helpful to the programs that we're serving who are just starting out to look at some of the processes that have been utilized and what things were successful and what things may have had challenges or barriers that you had to work through. Thank you, Melissa. She says Grand Traverse Band has been actively creating and updating truancy codes, also participating in a local truancy collaborative. Thank you so much for sharing that. I know that working with local partners can be really helpful. Randy, I see you have a question. We will pause for questions shortly. See if anyone else has shared about working through policy and code development. Christy, thank you for sharing. Truancy program with written policies and procedures, and a truancy officer. Thank you so much for sharing that. So Randy has a question. Truancy is only a status offense. What about any other that you all have? And is that, just a quick clarification, is that to the group, or is that just in a general question about status offenses? I'll let him clarify that, and then we'll definitely try to answer that for you, Randy. So thank you for all who have questions, and also thank you to those who've responded to these questions. Thank you, Sarah. Alan, I'm going to let you read question 4.
Yeah, thank you. So actually, thank you, Randy, for your question. Yeah, we are only really, this is part of the truancy online learning event kind of topic, so we're focused on truancy, but I think that it's a good question to ask about other codes and, other particularly codes related to juvenile justice. So one thing would be more than willing for questions like this, and we'd actually like to hear what are some other things you'd like to learn about truancy code and program policy development, if you could type that in. But just to also say at the end, when we offer you the opportunity to do an evaluation, please feel free to list in the evaluation other topics that you would like us to cover, because we can look at for future OLEs. So, but any other things that you guys want to learn specifically about truancy code? We have some information planned for this, but we want to make sure we answer any kind of other pressing questions that people may have. So feel free to post other questions too right now.
Thank you, Alan. And I will just pause really quickly. I know I heard some other people joining the room. Just a reminder that if you joined late, that's totally fine. Just note that you should mute your individual line. Just wanted to do one final reminder on that. And then again, thank you, Laura, for our tech overview. There are captions available for this session. And if you have questions or any issues, please feel free to chat or send us a question. We will respond throughout the learning session today, and then at the end we'll also have question time. So if you were present for sessions 1 and 2, we wanted to kind of go back to that and discuss some of the points that we learned in those sessions. And that was just to reiterate that truancy, there's no singular definition for that. It can be defined as any unexcused absence by the school. And we wanted to note that an absence that is excused by a parent but not by the school may still be classified as truancy. Virtually all states require children to attend school through public, private, or homeschool education. Many tribes do have existing juvenile codes that provide for diversion and address truancy within their communities, but like we just saw, they can differ in length and specificity. There may be a code that reflects more of the surrounding community or the state rather than specific provisions that reflect the current values or necessities that the tribe might require. And so that might be a reason that a tribe might want to engage in a code revision process. There are serious risk factors that are related to truancy that impact youth both presently and in the future. So we saw in sessions 1 and 2 that there are risk factors associated with youth who engage in truancy that impact the way that they interact with their current school system. And then we see risk factors that go well into the future, such as poverty, low ability to get a job, things that impact them long into the future. We noticed in session 1 and 2 that we covered the topic that punitive approaches can be ineffective, where we put youth in jail immediately or detention for status offenses. We know that those policies are highly ineffective, and that we discussed the fact that collaborative and restorative approaches can be helpful in this situation, and we know that there are a lot of ways that we can engage youth in intervention and prevention strategies that can truly support them if they are engaging in truancy on an ongoing basis.
So this is a good kind of pictorial representation when you're talking about effective truancy prevention programs. There's all these kind of other elements, meaningful incentives and consequences or sanctions, the intent of the code to be supportive rather than punitive. Kind of going back to Miranda's comment earlier about that they have a current team which includes education, social services, and legal services, and with the goal of re-examining their code. So that's the multidisciplinary approach. Family involvement, you'll see in our assessment tool that we're going to offer here in a little bit, you know, there are some criteria around engaging family and youth. in making decisions and thinking about hardships that your sanctions or consequences are imposing upon them. And also, of course, constantly evaluating not only for continuous quality improvement, but evaluating outcomes to see if what your codes and what your policies, if they're actually having an impact. So these are, kind of a overall, we're going to really focus on the codes itself here in a little bit, but, all of these things do play a role.
Thank you, Alan. And by revisiting those topics that we discussed in sessions 1 and 2, we really wanted to hone in on the fact that when you bring those known elements into your revision process, it can be really helpful. So when you start to gather a group of stakeholders or others who are going to be involved in a code development or a policy revision process, it can be helpful to look at some of those elements that go into effective programs and really be used to help educate others on your team that might be coming from a different service area in a way that can be helpful to the process that you're working through. So what should prevention programs consider as part of implementation? And from a review of literature by the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, prevention programs should be comprehensive, flexible, responsive, and persevering, and really should view children in the context of their families. When we look at looking at the community around them, that's the framework in which prevention programs can be really effective. It's, looking to what's needed in your community. And so when we share resources and information, we understand that those might be broad-reaching, but we can help you come up with strategies that can be helpful within your community. Prevention programs should have long-term preventative orientation and a clear mission and continue to evolve over time. So just as we've discussed, it's important to look at what are your current policies and procedures, and do they reflect your current needs? And so are they really meeting the needs of the youth currently, and what could you change or what could you implement that might be more effective as far as the strategies that you're implementing? Programs should have staff who are trained and supported and should be engaged in responsive services and operate in settings that encourage practitioners to build strong relationships built on mutual trust and respect. And so there's a lot that goes into developing an effective truancy program, and we have some resources and information that we can continue to provide you, but we just wanted to touch base on that before we moved into today's content. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Ashley.
Thanks, Anna. So now that we've talked a little bit about some of the important components or considerations for a truancy program, this is sort of a transition slide where we're going to turn now and discuss how we might integrate some of these ideas or processes or procedures into your tribal code. It's the hope that this next section will really give your community some things to consider as you are working towards creating truancy programs, policies, and codes that really consider the needs of your youth. And we're going to be talking specifically about, the work of the Trauma Center really is focused on how we support youth and families who maybe have experienced trauma. So you'll hear in the next section us really talk about trauma-informed code and policy development. So code revision and policy development can be one way, among many others, to support well-being of the youth in your community by integrating trauma-informed concepts and language into policy and code. Communities might be better able to address the unique needs of tribal youth. So specifically, could be an opportunity to consider alternatives to detention because, as we'll discuss in a few slides and Anna mentioned already, many of the youth who are involved in the juvenile justice system have experienced trauma, and interventions that acknowledges that while still holding youth accountable are preferable over more traditional sort of criminal punitive responses. Code revision can also be a unique opportunity for stakeholders to come together, use their collective knowledge and expertise to create processes that really support youth in a holistic way. So, for example, both physical health, but also education and mental health. These partnerships can be helpful in creating really a web of supports across systems. We know many of the youth who maybe come into the system, under a truancy provision may be crossover youth, and so they're represented in other places within juvenile justice or child welfare. Having multiple stakeholders at the table can be helpful in building a web that addresses the unique needs of those youth who might be interacting with multiple systems in your community. And finally, code revision and policy development can really ensure due process for court-involved youth. And what we mean by that is really ensures the fairness for tribal youth and tribal justice systems. When you're thinking about how to, approach code and policy development, I was encouraged to see in the chat box the ways in which your communities are already, working together via multiple systems, whether it's social services, law enforcement, education, to really think critically about how to build policy and codes that support the needs of youth. So this slide really helps us, offers some suggestions as you're beginning the process of code and policy development. So first, identify and select a group of committed stakeholders. And I would really say, ideally, this could also include consumers, right? So those youth and family in your community who might be impacted by the policies and the codes in which you're drafting, and they can be helpful in informing that process. Because we would hope that the response to youth would be one of support and rehabilitation, really consider involving stakeholders from multiple systems, as we talked some about, right, courts and schools, juvenile justice, child welfare, primary medical care. This multidisciplinary approach can also help provide more comprehensive input in the ways that maybe current policies and code language operate, where things are working, and maybe where there's opportunity to revise them so that they better meet the needs of youth and families in your community. It's really, I think, paired with that is that it's not uncommon often for the intent of certain policies and laws to be could be incongruent with the actual implementation, right? So you draft them in a particular way thinking that they are going to meet a particular need, but maybe as they roll out in implementation, you're seeing some consequences that you didn't predict. So if you involve a group of stakeholders who understand how existing laws and policies are working, then you can help identify these gaps or incongruencies and opportunity for change. Another step you might consider is the implementation of an assessment that gathers community input. So here and throughout the process, gathering feedback from professionals and community members who routinely interact with this particular area can give those who are crafting language a wider lens of perspectives to consider. And then importantly, code and policy can be an important way of infusing culture and restorative practices into a process that can otherwise feel punitive. So using this as an opportunity to consider alternatives to some of the more, perhaps traditional punitive responses, and meaningful integration of culture can support a restorative approach to supporting youth. So up to this point, we've talked some about the fact that it's important to consider, trauma on youth who've been involved in truancy proceedings. And we offer the information on this slide as a way of illustrating just how important that is because of the prevalence or how prevalent the experiences of trauma are for the youth involved in juvenile justice systems in particular. So we offer this as a way of just emphasizing how important considering trauma is for systems who wish to truly meet the the needs of the youth that they serve. So as you'll see here from the statistic, upwards of 80% of youth involved in the justice system report experiencing trauma. Therefore, if we know that many of the youth who enter this system have experienced trauma, and we don't take meaningful steps to address post-traumatic stress, it could lead to increased future involvement with the criminal justice system. So it really is a unique opportunity to consider these particular needs of youth and respond in a way that supports healing and doesn't re-traumatize youth. And when we think about the experience of trauma for youth in tribal communities, the United States Attorney General's Advisory Committee on American Indian and Alaska Native Children Exposed to Violence offers an important lens. Given what we know about the high rate of trauma experienced by tribal youth, the task force suggests that communities and programs really just assume trauma as a way to guide appropriate response and interventions. We'll talk more specifically about the need to screen and assess for trauma, and so while screening and assessment tools are really important and they can help you understand the unique ways that trauma impacts a particular individual, what their symptoms might be, those tools are part of but don't exclusively make up trauma-informed system practices. So by assuming that all youth have been exposed to trauma, all policies and practices, codes, each interaction that the system has with the youth can seek to support youth in a way that really facilitates their healing. Okay, so we're going to turn now and discuss some specific ways that Truancy codes can consider trauma. We'll be discussing a checklist that we developed that can be used to help your community really analyze your current code, or if you're in the, if you don't have a code or you're interested in developing one, just an opportunity to consider or help you consider ways you can promote trauma-informed processes, procedures in your code. So that checklist, which we'll be talking about in just a couple slides, was modeled off the provisions contained in the Model Indian Juvenile Code. The Model Indian Juvenile Code, this 2016 revision, has been adapted from the Model Tribal Juvenile Code, which is currently maintained by the Center of Indigenous Research and Justice, and it was originally developed by Native American Law Center, I believe, out of Washington. So this slide shows some of the language contained in the model code that speaks really specifically to the need to consider trauma in youth involved in the juvenile justice system. So as you'll note here on the slide, the language really asks court staff and practitioners to receive training in trauma, and this can help support a system that has a shared understanding and language about trauma and its impact on the youth who appear in court. In addition, the language really reflects the recommendation of the Attorney General's task force, in that, it asks that the court assume that children and families involved in the system have experienced trauma. And in considering this, the language includes ways that courts can promote a trauma-informed environment by ensuring, for example, that the courtroom feels as safe as possible to those who appear before it. In all of this, the goal really is to respect the experience of youth who come into contact with the juvenile justice system. We recommend, as you consider thinking about revising your truancy code, that language like this, or language that really promotes some of the intentions around this, could be one aspect of language that you consider in your own community. So the model code includes several chapters that focus on different areas, including delinquency and child in need of services. But Chapter 4 is what we're going to focus on today, and it really speaks specifically to truancy. So this is the portion of the code that we utilized when we created the checklist, which we're going to discuss next. And I see that I see some of this happening in the chat box, but also know that there's a link to the model code provided within the checklist tool, and that tool is downloadable below in the files pod at the bottom right of your screen. Okay, so in an effort to really help communities with the tribal code and policy development process, we developed a self-assessment tool to help guide and organize your process. So this tool was adapted from the National Child Traumatic Stress Network's Trauma-Informed Juvenile Court Self-Assessment Tool. It's a little bit of a mouthful, but that tool uses the 8 essential elements of a trauma-informed juvenile justice system to really guide courts in taking a look at their policies and practices and evaluate strengths and opportunities for growth in an effort to support youth who have experienced trauma. So while the layout of our tool is modeled off of NCTSN's self-assessment tool, the specific provisions that we use to actually evaluate, that you would use to evaluate your code comes from the BIA model code. So the tool includes approaches that may be integral as part of truancy code and program policy development, but just to note, this checklist does not include every provision contained within the truancy chapter. So what's included in the truancy chapter is much more robust than this, but what we included here is just a select few items that was really based on our experience, places that could offer significant steps towards trauma-informed practices relative to the truancy context. So we use the following ratings as a way to help guide your evaluation process. So ideally, you would work with a group of stakeholders in your community to take a look at your current policies, your current practices, to determine which of these provisions perhaps are currently in, maybe you're using them in practice but they're not in code, or maybe they are under discussion or consideration but they haven't been formally adopted into policy or code. Maybe it's an informal practice, so it's not formalized, but it's consistently used by court staff or judges or other individuals in the truancy system. Or maybe it's already a formal operating policy, so it's formalized in policy, but maybe it's not reflected yet in tribal code. And then finally, there's an opportunity to say, yes, this is in tribal code, it's a practice that's already reflected in that language. So as you would walk through the checklist, you would sort of, have a conversation looking at each of the different provisions to understand, are we talking about this? Where are we at in terms of incorporating this into some kind of more formalized way? And again, this would be an opportunity to get voices from all over the community, and also from consumers to understand where there is opportunity potentially for code language additions or maybe edits to what you currently have. And so we're going to actually pull the tool up now, please, Laura, so that I can walk you through just briefly what it contains. Alrighty, so this is what it actually looks like, and again, this is available to you to download in the files pod, Truancy Code Checklist. It includes the purpose section, which really just reiterates some of what we've discussed already in terms of really meeting the needs of youth and considering trauma in the process. We have some notes for you around, who you might want to involve in the self-assessment process. We go over and define, The rating elements benchmarks, so you have a good idea of how you might respond to each of the provisions. We have some considerations. I'm going to come back to those just a little bit here at the end. But also know that right here in the resources that inform this document are links to both the Model Juvenile Code, NCTSN's Juvenile Justice Court Self-Assessment, and also the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration's concept of trauma and guidance for a trauma-informed approach. So one of the things that you'll note on the checklist is that there are places, for example, here where we talk about the corresponding trauma-informed elements and principles. And so this is just a way to link for you the ways in which the language here, right, that you would include in your code supports trauma-informed practices. And so we've referenced either this language is consistent with essential elements of the juvenile justice system, or, for example, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services concept of trauma. And so we've noted those particular provisions, or we've noted those places for you. So you could go to SAMHSA's concept of trauma guiding document or the Juvenile Justice Court self-assessment to see more information about that. Okay, so in the first section here in purposes, this is really just an opportunity to reflect a commitment to trauma-informed training for court staff and those involved in the justice system who provide services to youth. It's also an opportunity to communicate a commitment to the well-being of youth and families, that efforts would be made to treat truancy as an opportunity for the use of restorative practices rather than legal consequences, and places focus on coordination of services to support youth and families who may be experiencing trauma. The compulsory school attendance section, brief. Really the importance of this just communicates exactly what the expectations are for school attendance so that it's transparent and clear to the community, and that this is directly communicated to them. The rights, rules, and procedures section. This section is important in that it really clearly communicates that under no circumstances, not even a valid court order, should a detention be used as a punishment for violations relative to truancy. And importantly, it also encourages the consideration of what might be meaningful sanctions and incentives for youth and families who come under this provision. Under the temporary custody section, just important to note here that the language discourages the use of restraints on youth, as we know that this can really be re-traumatizing, and also asks that those who maybe pick up a youth, right, whether it's police or someone else who has that designated authority in your community, perhaps it's a school officer, whoever does that kind of pickup of a youth for violations under this chapter, also connects that youth and family to appropriate resources. Under supervisory conditions, just continues to reinforce the idea that least means rather than detention is best practice for youth. It also asks whether code or policy requires fines be imposed for violations, and if so, to consider alternative sanctions that won't cause undue burden to the family. Informal proceedings. This section lays out code language that would allow for informal proceedings before the case was turned into a more formal process. So this just gives more opportunity to consider supportive services that could prevent future problems and keep the youth and family out of more formal proceedings. And then finally, disposition. This section communicates the need for disposition to be time limited so that the case doesn't linger unnecessarily in court. And then importantly, we also included this others section down at the bottom. And so we would encourage you to think about, as you're looking at the model truancy chapter from the model code, to see if there are other components within that chapter that you would want to take a look at, that your committee who might be in charge of policy or code review could consider in your evaluation process. Okay, with that, Laura, you can go ahead and close this and pull the slide up, please. Thank you. One of the things that we note in the code, or in the checklist, excuse me, up in the consideration section is that most trauma-informed, sort of both the essential elements of a trauma-informed juvenile justice system and also SAMHSA's concept of trauma really recommend that you use screening and assessment as a component of a trauma-informed system. And so those screenings and assessment really help professionals understand the impact that trauma is currently having on that individual youth. But what we note in considerations is that you should really critically examine all of the tools that are out there related to trauma screening for youth participants. Some of them may be a better fit for your community than others. Some of them may allow you more opportunity to infuse culture, for example, or considerations necessary for your community. So we just recommend that you take a look at those and think about if there's opportunity to adapt them, what that could look like. Some youth screening tools can be administered by service providers who are not mental health clinicians. So generally, screening tools can be administered by individuals who are not, for example, licensed clinical mental health providers. Clinical assessments, however, are tools that should be administered by licensed professionals. So whether that's a licensed clinical social worker, licensed professional counselor, licensed psychologist. And so we recognize that for the clinical assessments, it can really be based on resources within your community, and not every community has a robust kind of selection of licensed clinical professionals out there. So we just note that while clinical assessment tools, trauma-informed clinical assessment tools are great and helpful and ideal if you can, we also note that there could be resource limitations that could prevent their use in practice. So with that, I will turn it over to Alan.
Thank you so much, Ashley. So keep chatting in the chat box. I see we got some people sharing emails and stuff. That's wonderful that you guys could connect. There's a couple questions I've been kind of keeping track of. We'll address at the end. So we had an opportunity to look at a few tribal truancy codes that we had access to. Some of these we just downloaded. We found on different web pages. But it was our chance to kind of see how the tool worked out for us, because we spent a good amount of time looking at the tool. The model juvenile code is quite lengthy, and there's a lot of different sections. So we kind of did like our top 10, but we were able to look at like 6 different truancy codes and kind of just kind of go through the criteria and see how the tool was helpful or how it fared out. Again, I think one of the biggest challenges was a lot of the codes that we reviewed had section headers or titles of their sections weren't exactly what was found in the model juvenile code. Ashley kind of went through a few of them. So like, codes didn't necessarily have a section labeled informal processes or informal proceedings, but there was language or verbiage in the code that kind of addressed that. So kind of what we found was there was kind of these overall themes. So like number 1, purpose statements in the 6 codes that we reviewed. Most of them pretty much just talked about attendance being mandatory. We did have a couple codes that addressed more than just attendance, talked about protecting the overall physical and mental health of the youth. Some codes, purpose sections, talked about utilizing tribal traditions and tribal culture specifically into their things. In our assessment tool, you'll see that the purpose section is about going beyond just stating that there's compulsory attendance, and that there's more to it than just trying to keep kids in school. Most are those 6 codes that we reviewed. As I said, the model code has a section labeled informal processes. Most codes did not have necessarily that heading, but we noticed that the codes that we looked at did have verbiage in their codes about what needed to happen prior to any petition being filed. So there was talk about, that the school was responsible to try to resolve the attendance issue by meeting with the parents or, meeting with the youth or making a referral to a community organization. So most codes had some form of informal process. Our checklist has a very specific one that defines what they call an attendance review board or a truancy review board. But it's those informal processes prior to filing the petition that's important. Also, in our assessment, you'll see that those informal processes are not mandatory, but are voluntary for youth and families to participate. That might come to a shock to some people. I think it's part of that trauma-informed practice of people are going to change when they're ready. Therefore, we try not to force things upon them, especially if requiring them to attend a meeting or something might cause them undue hardship. So, considerations such as that in your informal processes. Most of the codes, a couple of the codes did talk about who and that the fact that youth can be taken into custody. In other words, during school hours, if a police officer sees a youth walking around the neighborhood, that they can, question them and if need be, take them into custody and return them to school or return them to home. That was outlined in a couple of the codes we reviewed. Our assessment tool gets a little more specific as far as even thinking about taking a child into custody, no use of physical, mechanical restraints, just the idea of putting a child in the back of a police car, a locked police car might be traumatic. So think about, who has the responsibility to pick them up and return them to school or home. So there's, the most codes were not really in depth. The assessment tool does ask for a few more criteria to think about. Penalties or supervision of youth, most of the codes had provisions for things like setting a child, child has to be home by setting curfews or, returning the child directly to their homes. Again, it was not really clear in a lot of the codes. And our checklist asked that when you think about what penalties, or if you're going to put the child on like a curfew, think about undue hardship to the family. If, sometimes requiring a family to make sure that a child is home at a certain time and stays home is difficult if both parents are working. So there's things like that to consider. And the other one under penalties, I think, in our assessment tool, one thing we noticed was none of the codes that we reviewed really talked about using incentives. And Anna introduced in the beginning how, sometimes providing incentives for good attendance, or when you do have a truancy prevention program, thinking about incentives rather than just sanctions or punishments. Could be a good approach and have been proven to be effective. And the other one that we did not find in really any of the codes and is this what we call notice of compulsory attendance. We noticed that there's some research out there that says just putting out a notice at the beginning of each school year stating that, attendance is compulsory, reminding parents of the penalties or reminding the parents of the programs that are available to them. Just putting out a good notice of compulsory attendance can improve attendance overall with youth. So, putting in your code that each year at the beginning of the school year, that's something we put in the tribal newspaper, or that postcards will be sent to the parents from the education department. I believe in this PowerPoint presentation, if you download it from the file box below in the reference section, we actually have an article on how to craft a good compulsory attendance notice to parents. So that might be a really good resource for some of you. And thank you, Natalie. I see you have attendances. That's great to hear that. But those are kind of like the overall themes. And again, just to remind you that, the section headings are based on the Model Juvenile Justice Code, and, so some of your codes might not have those exact headings, but as you go through your codes, kind of think about these themes overall to help you develop a effective code. Anna.
Thank you, Alan. That was a really good overview of how the tool was piloted, and again, in trying to summarize where we're at. So really our hope today was to share that assessment tool with you, and then to encourage you all to look at it and then know and understand that our team would love to continue to engage with you regarding the tool. So we didn't want to just hand it out and say, here you go, but wanted to reiterate that we are a training and technical assistance provider for OGJDP, and we provide support and training to both OGJDP grantees and really any federally recognized tribe. So if you're present and here today and you have more questions about the tool and about how to use that to assess your individual codes and policies, that's why we're here. So we're really excited that we can continue to support you after today, and you can submit a request to us anytime, and our team will get together and respond to you and help you work through that tool if you'd like. So we're really happy, and thank you, Ashley and Alan, for all the work that you put into developing that tool. And all the resources that we shared today, we're happy to look through those with you. And so I know we've shared several links. The one that Alan was referencing just now, I put that in the chat box. And that was actually a study that was done on modifying truancy notices. And so what one community noticed was that there was a vast improvement in responsiveness when the truancy notices that were getting sent out were realigned in plain language that families could understand. They were more direct and more clear, and they actually saw better outcomes when they did revise those notices. So when we look at how we're intervening in regards to truancy, it's really every element. It's the codes, the policies that we're implementing. It's the notices and the way that we approach families and youth. It's the way that we as staff are communicating. And so when we talk about being trauma-informed, I know Etheline shared earlier, I talked communication with her. She was using healing-informed, the ways in which we engage our community. It's really important at every level. So the ways that you're building your team, the ways that you're revising or looking at the approaches that you're utilizing, it's all going to support those youth that really do need us. They need our assistance sometimes to come in and say, how can we help? So with that, a specific tribal code that we wanted to share today was the Yurok Tribe Stay in School Ordinance, and that is available in the download pod. And one of the reasons that we specifically chose this code wasn't because we thought, oh, this is the best one. It was just one that we thought aligned with some of the elements that are in that checklist. And so I found after a reading of this code was that it promotes prevention and diversion. It provides for the specific cultural values of this community, and that it favors supportive services, supervision, care, and really had an emphasis on rehabilitation. And so when you look at the ways that your code can be solution-focused and supportive of the approaches that you want to utilize in your programming, I think it's important to say, yeah, we can take the time to look at our code, our policies and procedures, and look at the ways that we really can integrate what we think is going to be most helpful for our youth. And so a section that I thought was important to look at was 2103. And I really liked this section because it was talking about reasons for absence, and I liked that it clearly indicated if a youth is gone for a ceremony, for something that's important to them in regards to religion or things like that. I know that that's one of the elements we talked about in standard school systems. We see that a school may not excuse certain absences just because the family believes that it's an absence of value or importance. And so this community directly addressed that if a youth were to be absent for these reasons, that it was going to be excused. And so I really liked that. I wanted to highlight that. And then you can see in section 2103E, participation in ceremony or preparation, because we know that in different communities, these are reasons that youth may be away from school and that they are important. And when you can really back up those reasons within your community and say that this is so important to us that we want to codify it, I think that that's celebrating that sovereignty. Another portion of the code that I thought was in line with the resource tool that we shared today was the family education advocate. So within the UROC community, there is a family education advocate, and it's codified that that individual will basically be providing this outreach for collaborative services. And so we've seen in the research and the data and everything that we've shared in sessions 1 and 2 that truancy programs that are collaborative are some of the most effective programs. And so by codifying that and giving provision to those collaborative services, the tribe really is saying that we are going to utilize a comprehensive approach and integrate that within their court system. So I think that that's a really good thing to point out. And so we are going to pause for some questions. If some things have popped into your mind over time. Alan, you said you were tracking a couple of questions. I'll go back to you for that. But those are some of the materials that we wanted to share today, and really do want to emphasize again that we are here to support you if you're working through this process. We are available for training or support. Both the Tribal Youth Resource Center and our partner, the National Native Children's Trauma Center, will work together to support you all as you continue to develop your truancy prevention program. So I'm going to pause for a little bit, let individuals ask questions if you have any, and then Ashley and Alan, if you have any additional points you want to make, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, there was a couple questions I just kind of kept up. I put in Q&A, but there wasn't early on in the webinar we talked about, you know, this kind of community collaborative, this multidisciplinary approach, and I think somebody had a question around, you know, how many, you know, have schools that are public schools operated within their lands. I know we had somebody here from Grand Traverse Band in Michigan here, and they're using their tribal youth program funding to hopefully combat truancy, and that was an issue. They actually have I forget how many different school districts within their lands or their area, so they're actually working with multiple schools, so it can be challenging when looking at revamping your truancy codes and practices, because the schools determine what's considered truancy and attendance and such. So that is a challenge. We realize that. I don't know, Ashley, if you had anything else to share around special considerations when tribes have state-operated schools on their lands, or when they're working across multiple school districts for changing their codes?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I unfortunately I don't have a lot of sort of information and thoughts about that. I'd be happy to do some additional research and thinking around that. If folks have that particular question, please feel free to email, and I'm happy to do some more digging around that.
Yeah, me too. Also, definitely, if this is a question that or a situation that you're experiencing, if you contact Ashley or I or even Anna, we are familiar with some different tribal grantees who are in that same situation. We can maybe connect you with them to help. They can help you figure out what worked for them, what didn't work. Another question, and again, Ashley, don't mean to put you on the spot. So there was one question about, are there any particular recommended youth trauma screening tools? Do we have a resource we can provide?
There are many out there, yes, and some are certainly better than others. One resource I would highly recommend, if you haven't taken a look already, is the National Child Traumatic Stress Network. Again, that's, we really borrowed from their court self-assessment tool, but that website has a lot of information around different areas, all relative to trauma. And so I would suggest that would be a starting place. And I believe they do have, a list of what's currently out there. But if they don't, then I think that they do provide, more information around different websites and resources that you could also consider. And again, if you have, please feel free to email me that question, and I do have some, kind of at my fingertips from other projects that I would be happy to share and email out to folks.
Thank you, Ashley. Yeah, so the National Native Children's Trauma Center, I just posted the website address. That's one place to find out more about us and get our contact information. Also, there's the Tribal Youth Resource Center, which I'll post the website. The Tribal Youth Resource Center, if you go to their website and make a request for TTA and put in your request that you're looking for specific around recommended or good trauma screening tools, that's another way you can get to it. And then the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, Ashley just posted, it's nctsn.org. Those are some good places if you're looking for some specific screening tools. So those are the two kind of questions that Anna felt like we're still out there. So, but any other questions? I was too busy talking, wasn't reading. Did you know?
I see Julia posted a question about how youth want to receive education through alternative education, and then they become so comfortable in that they don't realize they are not receiving a proper education. So I think I would do a follow-up question with what is the alternative education that they go into, and what about that process do you think is more appealing for the youth? So it would be the attendance requirements themselves, or that specific program, what's occurring in there?
Yeah, that is a good question. We have an alternative education program that actually takes the word alternative seriously. the program has kind of they're dedicated to making sure that the youth receive what is truly an alternative education program, which wasn't meant to be a place where youth can go if they're getting in too much trouble or want to smoke or whatever. But yeah, I mean that I've known communities where alternative education have been misused, but again, reach out with those questions, and we'll see what kind of information we could find on that also.
Mm-hmm. I see Christy commented about an uptake in youth leaving traditional school systems and enrolling in local online virtual schools, which we see that, one of the impacts of truancy is youth not in schools, and then what are those behaviors that they may engage in that, are risky or otherwise problematic within the community. And so if that's something that you're seeing in the community related to an increase of youth in an online school system, I think that's definitely an issue that we could explore further. Is that system creating some of the same, if not more, issues that are occurring because of truancy? Because, once a youth is not in the school system itself, those individuals that can provide support in whatever way, they're not being involved in that youth's life anymore. And so I think that's of particular concern. So thank you for sharing that issue. I see Julia followed up with that that's exactly what they're doing. Alan or Ashley, thoughts on that?
Again, I think much like alternative, some of these online schools, there is actually some really good ones out there. I guess you could get into the question that if a youth is attending an online school, that takes a lot of personal commitment, a lot of, they're independent, they have to be responsible, but at the same time, I could see how it could benefit some youth, particularly youth that might have an anxiety disorder or something like that, where they're having a hard time attending public school. So again, there's benefits, there's advantages and disadvantages to that, but definitely, you want to try to make sure with good code development and policy development, sometimes if you remove those factors, particularly, if the child feels safe at school and the child, has friends and enjoys going to school, then they're going to be willing to go to school. But yeah, another good topic, I think that, again, I want to share that when we do your evaluation, any of these special considerations, feel free to share them. And it's fun as a resource center to look into some of these issues and come up with some kind of either webinar or maybe even a fact sheet or some kind of guidance on, what's working and what's not working. And that'd be a great thing for us to take on.
So that's a great segue into what we wanted to share was that from these learning sessions, I think we have several individuals who have been able to join us ongoing, and what we're looking forward to is beginning an open community of practice related to the issue of truancy prevention and the development of comprehensive programs that can support your community's youth. And so I'm really excited about carrying forward a lot of the issues and the comments that came out of sessions 1 and now all the way through 3 today. So any of you who've joined us today, what we'll do is include you on our outreach list when we start that community of practice. So if you're interested, you'll be welcome to join. If you're not interested, that's fine too. We hope that you found today's session interesting. I want to also say that any of the questions that came up today, if there's comments or feedback or things like that that you have on the evaluation, there is space to list out additional questions and then also request follow-up from our team if there's a question that you were not comfortable asking today. So we're happy to follow up with you individually. So just make sure and complete the evaluation, and a link will be provided at the end of this session. I want to thank Kip for the comment that he shared. I just had one more follow-up as far as developing a prevention or intervention program in response to these online issues that came up. The ability to be creative with your programming, I think working in conjunction with your local school and having a program that is comprehensive, that does support both students who are attending traditional schools and then also those youth who are attending virtual schools. So maybe that's an element or a component that you build into your prevention program, or you coordinate that with your tribal education department. I think that's a really unique and current issue that's probably coming up on a broader scale, and so I think that's something that we can definitely discuss further. So we just wanted to close out today, and thank you all so much for joining us. I want to thank Alan and Ashley for the contributions of their time towards developing that tool, but then also working through a review of several tribal codes. And so I really appreciate the time that you put into that and being here today. And then to thank all of you that are joining us today. We appreciate everyone who's shared things in the chat box. Thank you for your presence with us and for taking part in this learning session. We appreciate everyone's thoughts and for sharing about your communities. I know that we have several new tribal grantees who are just starting out. And so if you have questions or you want to be connected to another program, if there's a way that we can help you, or if you're not an OJJDP grantee and you are interested in more training opportunities or resources that we have available, you can always reach out to us at tribalyouth@tlpi.org. We also have a website. Oh, Laura, I'm making sure I'm getting our email and our website not mixed up. Tribalyouth.org is our website, and tribalyouth@tlpi.org is our email. And so we'll put both of those in the chat box for you. And then I will just quickly close this out. Hizagadamisi, give her a breath. Mado, thank you. Thank you for today. Thank you for all of these providers, all of these individuals who are here joining us. And we appreciate all the work that they're doing in the lives of the youth that they serve and working towards better communities across the country. We thank you so much for giving us breath today, giving us another day, time to connect with each other, and our hope is that our youth continue to thrive. So thank you all for joining today. Laura, I'm going to let you give information about the evaluation.
Thank you, everyone. A link was just posted in the chat box. We really appreciate your feedback. If you were able to take a moment following today's online learning event to participate, we would really appreciate it. And thank you so much, Anna.
Thank you. We hope you all have a wonderful day, a good rest of your week, and a happy Valentine's Day.